One of the things that people with ADHD often say is that one of the most difficult parts of living day to day with ADHD is this constant feeling of anxiety. And certainly for very young children, that's much more difficult for them to handle, because often they don't have a language to explain how they're feeling, and they don't often understand the cause or the reason as to why they're feeling the way they do. So for children, they'll often present with a sore tummy, or saying that they feel sickly, or they could be very clingy and want to get a hug and hold on to parents. Children will communicate their anxiety in lots of different ways, and every child is different, but there are certain things that we can look out for that will tell us that the child's behaviour is communicating something to us that they're not actually able to articulate or find the right words to explain. But actually that can also be true of adults as well. Sometimes life can be so busy that we can get through a day and look back on it and wonder, where did that go and how did that happen, and not actually realise just how stressed we were until we stubbed our toe on the door, and that was the moment all that pressure and stress finally finds some outlet. And we might call that door some unmentionable things, but really it's not the door we're angry at, it's just that we've been building up all that pressure during the day, and we've got elevated levels of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol coursing through our brains. But I think if we're going to really understand anxiety and how to manage it, we need to think really about, well, what's the difference between stress and anxiety? Stress can actually be a good thing. Stress is our body's ability to turbocharge us when the environment we're in and the circumstances and situations we're in demand of us that extra bit of effort and that extra bit of energy. And our bodies are very efficient at doing that. And one really positive example of that might be an athlete, for example. You can see them running 100 meters, putting their bodies through tremendous pressure and stress, but at the end of it, they don't feel down or exhausted or unwell. They feel exhilarated. Stress in short bursts can actually be good for us. It's a great way of tapping into a hidden vat of energy that we need to help us deal with a high pressure situation. What happens when we're experiencing stress all the time, every day, day after day, where the stress becomes pervasive? Then what happens is we begin to feel anxious all the time. In other words, instead of using those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to give us that extra bit of energy and ability in high pressure situations, if we're using those turbocharging neurochemicals all the time, then what happens is our body responds to that because they're not designed to be running high levels of stress hormones all the time. So we start to feel very tired, we start to feel unwell, we start to find it difficult to concentrate, we become forgetful. How many of us have had a busy day and can't find our keys? It's a very common thing, and often we don't realise how stressed we are until we actually have a day off. And I work with a lot of people, particularly in education, whose life is on 6-week half-term cycles, and they say, don't understand why it is on the first few days of the holiday you get sick. And actually the reason for that is that if you've been running pervasive levels of stress hormones over a prolonged period, your immune system is quite compromised. So you start to feel unwell when you first have a day's rest, because it's the resting that gives your body the opportunity to use energy to start healing itself or getting rid of whatever germs or infection that you've had. So stress can be helpful. Too much stress, pervasive, continual stress, can make us feel quite ill. And if it goes on for a very long time, we will start to feel depressed, because our bodies are just not designed to be using that turbocharging stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol all the time. And the other thing about high levels of anxiety and stress is that they do impair our ability to concentrate. They impair our ability to plan and organise. They impair our ability to respond appropriately to different situations. And a lot of people, when I ask them how they experience stress and they describe their behaviour, what they describe often sounds a bit like ADHD. It's not that they've all got ADHD at all, but that also tells you something about that constant anxiety that people with ADHD live with all the time. So what do we do about this? Because I know some people as well who say they feel anxious all the time, but actually there's nothing really wrong in their life. So sometimes some of that anxiety, that stress, isn't about what the world is demanding of us. Because really a definition of stress would be elevated levels of energy and vigilance, and elevated levels of cognition, because our body is ready to deal with a high pressure situation. When we start to feel overly stressed or anxious, it's when we have the belief that somehow we just don't have the resources to deal with whatever it is our environment is asking of us. Sometimes we're going through the day and we just think, I just can't do any more, I've got too many plates to spin. And that's the point where anxiety really starts to kick in and affect not just our sense of well-being, but also our ability to function. And it affects even how we speak to people and communicate with people. So sometimes stress is a response to our environment. But sometimes that stress and that anxiety is caused by what goes on in our heads. Worry, fear, self-doubt, limiting self-beliefs that you're not going to be able to do this or you're not going to achieve. And actually, do you know, when we're all tired, sometimes it feels like our world is a glass half empty rather than a glass full, or a glass that we can use to quench our thirst. When we're really tired and stressed and run down, we start to see the world in a slightly more negative way. We can become pessimistic rather than optimistic. We can doubt our natural ability to do things that we know we've always been able to do, but right now in that moment we feel completely worn down by the pressure that we're under. And again, sometimes it is about being able to understand, is that pressure and anxiety coming from inside my head and my own self-limiting beliefs or my fears, or is that anxiety response to something that's happening in my world all around me that's making me feel this unease, this pressure, this anxiety to rise to the challenge of whatever it is my environment's asking me to do. How we cope with this is really a complex question for all of us, because all of us have different ways of dealing with stress, and some of them are really effective, some of them not so effective. So if you're the kind of person who goes for a glass of wine or goes shopping, then maybe they're not the most effective stress release strategies. But what we recommend, and this is for children as well as adults, is stress reduction strategies shouldn't just be something that you employ to react to a situation at hand. Stress reduction strategies actually should be part of your daily lifestyle. So every day you should find 5 minutes, morning, noon and night, to slow your breathing down, deep breaths, in for 5, out for 5, and just relax your body, slow your heartbeat down. And actually just by doing that alone, you will improve your ability to concentrate, you'll improve your ability to problem solve, and you'll also help your body get back into some kind of balance. But lots of other stress reduction strategies should be used on a daily basis, whether that's getting up early and having some solitude time in the morning, things like progressive muscle relaxation, worth looking up on YouTube if you don't know what progressive muscle relaxation is, mindfulness, going for a brisk walk, even dancing can be a great way of reducing stress. exercise is a great way of reducing stress and anxiety. But here's the thing, if you do those things every day, if you eat a healthy diet, particularly if you have a breakfast, you're less likely to produce excess amounts of adrenaline and cortisol, because your body can burn fuel from your food rather than relying on stress hormones for energy to get you through the day. So eat well, have a good diet, make sure you have some protein in the morning at your breakfast, but daily practice things like deep breathing, mindfulness, exercise, even if it's only a brisk walk, and schedule those in, even if it's only for a few minutes, a few times a day. Do that and you'll build resilience within your nervous system and your autonomic nervous system, so that when a high pressure situation does arise, you're actually better able to cope with that, because there's greater resilience physically as well as mentally.